Podcasting from Astrolab Studios, this is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we revisit sci-fi, fantasy, and just plain weird shows that have faded from the collective consciousness and didn't quite make the impact that they intended. This week, Baffled.
You think I'm silly, or maybe dangerous. Well, I'm neither. And I have none of the powers which I'm convinced that you have.
It may come as an unpleasant shock to you, Michelle, but I'm not scared of black cats, Friday the 13th, or walking under ladders. As a matter of fact, every once in a while, I get my kicks walking under a ladder.
Not strange at all, considering who you are.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that explores forgotten and underseen science fiction television. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan, and this week we're joined by a guest. What's real, Will?
Hey guys.
That was some delay there.
What's real?
What's real? That's our catchphrase when we start the show. Usually I ask Jordan, though. Jordan, what's real? And he usually pauses.
I always
just like
forget.
you.
Every single week he asks me what's real, and then I go, oh no, I should have thought of something that was real. But it's okay. It's only been 50 episodes or so.
So your reaction was as authentic as it normally is.
Yeah. Well, what's real is we're talking about Baffled! Exclamation mark.
Yes, the first show we've watched with an exclamation point in the title.
I love it.
So, well, I think you know a little bit about the podcast and what we do here.
Absolutely.
But why don't I ask you a little bit about your background with science fiction television? Have you watched a lot of sci-fi TV in your life? Is this a relatively unvisited genre for you?
I don't think I watched any sci-fi shows.
That's okay. You don't have to have watched any sci-fi shows. That's what happens when you come on here. You have to watch one, whether you like them or not.
Question 2: How many sci-fi nerds have you beaten up?
I've never beaten anyone up. That's not true either.
I've never beaten anyone up. I've never been beaten up either. I've had a couple close calls.
I've been beaten up in hockey before pretty badly.
But see,
never really
seemed
beaten anyone up
allowed.
Yeah,
I
it's like allowed,
I avoided a real beating in high school one time, which was wholly deserved because I had been trashing this guy verbally for a long time, and then before an exam, he came to find me to beat me up.
How many bros in high school have you tormented, Jordan?
Well, he kind of deserved it, just because
tell us the story.
His existence was just annoying to me. So I was just always like kind of teasing him, and he found out about it. Then he like came to like beat me up. But thankfully I had two much larger, more muscular friends with me, and that stopped the fight. And so I could just continue being the little smart aleck that I always am.
That's perfect.
Yeah, his name was Jeff.
Is Jeff going to be a guest on the show, guys?
No. He's too busy drinking his creatine like he was doing in high school. I'd make fun of him for that. He'd be in class always shaking it. His creatine. Got to get big.
Gotta be strong.
Yeah, gotta be strong. Anyway.
I did watch I watched a bunch of episodes of Stargate SGU because it was like my dad's favorite TV show, and you know, if there was like nothing else going on, I'd go hang out with my dad, and he would explain like how some of the people have like worms in their brains and like it controls them. But and they have like swords that shoot like laser beams out of them, and they go through to like different dimensions through a Stargate.
Luke, how come we haven't watched Stargate? That sounds way better than Baffled.
I was wondering, can we get Will's dad down here quickly or what?
He would definitely be a great guest for you.
So this week we've watched this show called Baffled, a Leonard Nimoy TV movie failed pilot. Had anyone ever heard of Baffled before?
I've never. It seems like it's in this weird existence of post-Star Trek careers. We kind of joked about Shatner before, and even Roddenberry, of sort of after Star Trek, there doesn't seem to be much that happens. I know that Leonard Nimoy went on to become a pretty good director and directed some pretty large movies. Like, I think his biggest movie was Two Men and a Baby. I think that was his.
That's correct.
That's his big hit. And also a couple of the Star Trek movies and stuff. Like he did, and he went on to become a photographer and all this sort of stuff. But in terms of like his acting career, I mean, he did a lot, but nothing that I think stands out. And I think this is one of them.
This was a standout in his career?
No, I think it was not a standout in his career. But here's the only thing I have to say about that is, isn't it weird to see him smile all the time?
It is weird.
I'm so used to seeing him being Spock.
I never watched like a ton of Star Trek, but it was like the only reference I had for this film, like Leonard Nimoy, and it was basically trying to watch Spock be a leading man
with pink turtlenecks on.
Yeah, it was kind of insane. I mean, I feel like they just named this movie after the feeling I had after finishing it.
Yeah, and which is weird too. The thing Baffled. No one in this is really baffled. Like we'll get into it, but like they're like, hey, by the way, you can tell the future. He's like, huh. I was like, I'd be baffled. He's not baffled at all.
Yeah, spoiler for everyone of my personal life. Will and I work together, and Will was asking me all day. He's like, "Is Leonard Nimoy attractive? Is he an attractive man?"
I think
I was wondering the whole time. I was like, he's got a unique look, and he's
striking.
got confidence. But
well, he had him and Shatner were like kind of like sex icons in the 60s.
oh, really?
Yeah, and again, it was the beginning of like, wouldn't it be cool if these two guys, I don't know, if they kissed a little bit? There's a lot of those drawings. But like, I think he has sort of striking features, like some other men in that time, like Dustin Hoffman or Telly Savalas, sort of like guys that you wouldn't really think of as leading men now. In the 70s, I think there's a little bit more leeway of kind of interesting features.
Well, that was the other thing too. I kept wondering. I'm like, how famous is Leonard Nimoy at the time he made this film? Like, did he read the script, or was he like, I'll just take any job that's coming my way?
It's a good question. I mean, it's post Star Trek, and that was a failure at the time, right? So this is like I'll tell you when this came out. This was broadcast January 30th, 1973.
But I think at this point, I think the rumblings of Star Trek were coming back. I mean, like conventions and things had happened. So I think people knew who he was, but I think he was only seen as Spock. You know?
Yeah.
So is that why he maybe gets a science fiction weird psychic thing like this? Because they're like, well, maybe Spock's name will push this forward. Or is it just like, I need a job?
Yeah.
I think it's probably a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. You know.
This was I think you brought this up to me, Jordan, before we started watching. But I guess this originally before it was screened on television, was a brief film in theaters in the UK.
Yeah. So they actually did film this in England. Not where they say it is. I can't remember what the town is they say, but it didn't actually film there. But I guess as part of filming there, they released it as a movie in theaters like 4 months before. So that's why the dates are a little off on some of these. You'll see it as 1972 or sometimes 1973. But it aired on NBC in January 30th, 1973. But it was in theaters before that.
I had seen it put down as a second feature in the UK. Is this like something you'd go and see like a double feature? And maybe this was just like you paid to see The Godfather, but if you wanted to stick around for the 2 hours, you could watch Baffled.
Oh, well, maybe
it's like
it was
playing at the drive-ins or something like that.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
I found a whole bunch of movie posters for it though. Not much for about on TV, but a ton of the movie posters that were, I guess, plastered around England.
Maybe it was a huge success. We don't know.
I don't think it was.
I typed it into Box Office Mojo, but
no box
results.
Office. No box office.
No
Didn't
results.
see anything.
Before we get into it, I'm going to give us a little background because this is something I like to do, and I don't think anyone else enjoys it, but for some reason I do. I'm going to give us a little sense of what the world was like when Baffled originally was broadcast.
In 1973?
1973. I went into 1972 a little bit because I figured it was in the movie theaters too. So, but here are the two kind of big things that were happening when when Nimoy was gracing everyone's screen. December 19th, Apollo 17 returns to Earth, and it's the final Apollo mission. So that's sort of the end of that first, I think, moon missions.
Which is Apollo 11. Was that the one that...
17, sorry, yeah. Or 13's the one that exploded.
13 exploded, and what was the one with Tom Hanks?
That's the one.
Oh, 13. Apollo 13?
11's the one that landed on the moon, right?
Yeah, 11 landed on the moon. 13 had a problem.
And 17, they said, enough of this.
And 17, they're like, well, there's nothing else to see on the moon. Let's all come home. And the other thing that was happening during this, it was the end of the Vietnam War. Nixon had ordered this Christmas bombing of Vietnam, but basically bombed the Vietnamese into submission, and they signed a peace treaty shortly after that. And then in between those two things, Nixon got reelected.
Yeah, it turned out well for him.
Yeah, Baffled was coming out. Nixon was winning elections. What a time.
And men were wearing the worst outfits ever. We'll say it now, but what's his? I was going to say Shatner. Nimoy wears, every scene he's in, it's like, what could be a funnier outfit? One, he's wearing a pink turtleneck. One, he's wearing like a white leisure suit with like cowboy embroidery. And I think he wears an ascot at one point. It's just, he just looks terrible. Every scene is like, you look ridiculous. But
the white blazer was my favorite.
Yeah, but everyone loves him though. Like the women are just like, yeah, he looks good.
I don't know, man. I think he does look good.
Do you?
When we asked that question, my thing was like, I think he might be attractive. I'm not sure. We'll get into it.
We'll get into how attractive he is.
We asked Hillary what
our coworker
what she thought, and she was like, yeah, I don't know, like she was so. And then we showed her the scene of him when the leading lady opens the door and he's like leaning there with
White blazer.
The white blazer. And what was his line? I thought British people said schedule. And she's like, oh no.
But you've used that line before, right?
Yeah, all the time.
I mean, I think that lean on the door frame when someone opens the door is a real power move.
Yeah.
Like if you're leaning against the door frame.
It's like, I know I knocked on your door, but I don't have to come in. I can just hang out here.
I know he is. Oh, you caught me just out in the hallway.
Making
I'll
sure I don't
come
get
in.
any marks on this white blazer.
Got to be very careful. It has to go
Yeah.
back later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
All right.
that blazer you're wearing like 3 times, and then that's garbage.
Well, by the time this aired, I guarantee that blazer was not in fashion anymore. They probably shot it in 1971. They're like, guys, this is going to be the thing everyone's going to wear. And by 1972, probably no one was wearing this blazer.
All right. Well, let me do the IMDb summary for Baffled, and then we can get into it. Race car driver suffers from visions where he sees people killed. An ESP expert believes that his visions will really happen. That was courtesy of Brian VN at prodigy.net.
I guess that's the plot. But did they say an ESP expert? Isn't she just a bookseller?
That is a good question.
Because it also it makes no sense in this movie. Suddenly this woman just, we're gonna get into it, but a woman just shows up and she's like, "Hey, want to be like crime fighters?" And he's like, "All right," and that's how it goes.
Yeah, she sees an interview of him on TV talking about visions, and then she takes it on herself to save the woman in the vision of this race car driver she's watching on television.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So she might be an ESP expert, but
that's Leonard Nimoy. He's in this show a race car driver. Nothing special or supernatural. He's just a man who's good at driving race cars. He's in the Pennsylvania USAC 500. What kind of racing is this? Will, is this F1 racing? I don't know anything about racing.
I don't either. I thought it was Formula One.
Yeah, that's
Is
what I
that
thought too.
F1, yeah.
But
Because it's not NASCAR. The NASCAR has like cars.
yeah, it's kind of got that car that's like skinny with a point, like a shark at the end, like a hammerhead
Yeah, like
shark.
a hammerhead shark, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, maybe this is F1. I'm not really sure. But essentially, we kind of see him racing his cars, which is my favorite thing because every time you cut to Nimoy driving the car, it's just that classic 70s back projection.
yeah. Well, the actual driving around looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And that looks like it's like real Smokey and the Bandit, sort of like going around. But then, they cut to that terrible green screen where it's him and he's moving a wheel like no one would ever move a wheel. We were watching, and then Laura said that's because it was before power steering. But I don't know if that's what it is. I think it's just actors doing this. And no one can see what I'm doing, but I'm moving my hands real quick.
Imagine Jordan is not just jerking off one dick, but 2, one in each hand.
But not in unison. Like
No,
opposite.
No.
it's off.
It's like milking
It's
a
off
cow.
tempo.
You don't do it. Yeah, off tempo. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
You want to be in the big leagues.
It's funny how like that you were watching like the race car stuff and thinking like, oh, this is like not buyable or not believable. There was so many. I thought that was some of the finest production value we saw in the film. I was like, okay, like, they got the racing car stuff. They got that pretty well done. And then for, 1971 or whatever. But then as the movie went on, I was like, but no one read this script before they went to camera.
No, it seems like they ad-libbed the whole thing.
I think it's like I love how the producer is also the director. And he must have just like
Passion
found
project.
a script on a coffee table and is like, and off we go to production.
It was holding up the coffee table.
It is a bizarre script, and this is certainly like the race car stuff at the beginning is some of my favorite stuff. And in this race, basically kicking off the entire show, Nimoy has a car accident. I guess he kind of has a vision in the middle of the race, which causes him to have the car accident.
Yeah, he spins out of control and kind of crashes to the side. They kind of make it seem like it was a bigger crash than it was because he's like somewhat injured, but he basically just like kind of veers off into some like hay. That's about it.
He like back ends into a tree, and then you see Nimoy getting some sort of direction like, "You're dead," and he just kind of like thumps his head to the side for it, and then like the crew runs over and pulls him out, and he's just like, they're like, "Oh my god, that's such a bad crash." He's like, "No, I'm fine."
Yeah.
I'm just like, what happened? Because later, because what will happen is after this crash, we'll jump cut to him in the middle of an interview on television, telling them about the visions he had when he crashed.
Yeah, it's weird because they clearly want to get the point across to the viewer that he's now gained these superpowers through this crash. Like, how are we going to do it? It's like, well, he'd be interviewed about it, clearly. And so he's just on, and it was really weird. But it's also a scene to introduce the other character. Do you know what's her name?
What is her name? Fine question. Let me pull it up here.
Michelle
Brandt.
Brandt.
Yeah, Michelle Brandt. Yeah.
Michelle Brandt, yes.
Played by Susan Hampshire.
Yeah.
The rare books trader who, by trading rare books, has become an occult expert.
Yeah. Which, but did anyone else in this room realize it was about a cult until about 5 minutes to the end? Because I didn't. Maybe I missed it. But at the end, they're like a cult. I'm like, what?
She says occult a lot.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I think I
that.
just stopped listening anytime she talked. Maybe.
I just thought it
Because,
was funny. Like she was a bookseller. Like she could just be an occult like person that sees the interview.
Yeah. Why can't she be just a researcher?
I mean, there's no reason that Leonard Nimoy's character needed to be a race car driver, or any reason why this race car driver should be the
because they
recipient of these.
They have to
visions.
have that race scene at the end. That's how you know he has a race car driver. That's it.
Did you? This comes up much later, but did you catch the backstory for how she got into her line of work?
No.
No, I missed it.
She late in the show, she kind of goes into how she got into the line of work. She's like, when I was younger, I was gonna join a convent, but then I won a beauty contest and went to university.
No way.
As you do.
I was just like, what? What is this apropos to anything?
This show has really, really odd dialogue, and I couldn't tell if the actors it was like a mouthful for them, or it was just really, really badly written. But every scene, it's like they did one take and thought, that's good, that's enough.
I think it's a combination of just having really unnatural dialogue and then subpar actors delivering them.
Well, there you go.
With a director who didn't do a pass on the script.
Yeah. Baffled! Exclamation mark.
I like, basically, she sees him on TV, and we immediately jump cut to the inside of Leonard Nimoy's apartment where she's already arrived.
Yeah.
Like, there's no futzing around with how people get from place to place in this. She's just like, I got to talk to this guy about his visions. Cut. She's just sitting in his apartment talking about his visions. I'm like, how did you get in there?
Yeah, there does seem to be a few scenes missing, but I did appreciate that they just wanted to keep things moving. Like, he's a race car driver. He banged his head. He has ESP. All right, guys, move on. She's a bookseller. She's down at his apartment. Move on. Let's just get it going. It's like, all right, all these details, don't worry about it. It's going to, and it's like, because the payoff's going to be so good at the end. It'll be all worth it.
I actually think there is no stuff missing. It's funny. It doesn't work. But we've watched a lot of these older shows where they'll just like drag things on forever, like literally watching someone get in a car and drive where they're going and get there. And this show seems to understand it's like the audience doesn't need any of that. We can just jump to the relevant information. It's just not good at executing that because it still gives you all the information you need. It's just like so jarring. It just jumps you so jarringly across time.
And we find out though here that his name's Kovac because I think they say it like 14 times in the scene. They like even talk about it because at one point she's like, "Is that Polish?" Because she suddenly becomes my father. Has to know everyone's nationality based on their last name.
Yeah,
he was like, "Yes, it's Polish." It was like, "Oh, this is not." They spend so much time on weird dialogue like this, but don't explain why a woman just how she appeared in someone's apartment.
Yes, his name is Tom Kovac, international race car driver, and now potential psychic, because she's come there to basically convince him that his visions are real. She makes him like draw. Actually, we haven't said this. Do you remember what he saw in his visions?
He saw the castle, the woman screaming, and a hay wagon.
Yes, exactly. And she thinks this woman's in trouble. So she's there to be like, hey, why don't you draw the house you saw in your vision so I can prove to you that you have psychic abilities?
I love that because she gets him to draw a castle and he draws it and she goes, "That's fantastic." And I yelled at the TV, "It's not fantastic. It was a terrible, terrible drawing."
It really didn't look anything
It didn't look anything like the castle. And she's like, "That's the castle." I was like, oh, she just wants to spend time with this guy because it looks nothing like that.
Yeah, she was very encouraging of anything that he said. He's like, "Oh, here's like a castle." And she's like, "That's fantastic." And he's like, "Oh, I had this vision." She's like, "Amazing."
Yeah. Well, she said to him, she goes, that he had a rare and mysterious insight. That's what I wrote down.
Oh, rare and mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
Nimoy, on the other hand, he doesn't really care about his visions. He really just wants to like go on a date. He keeps trying to get her a martini. Or at one point he asks her, he's like, "I know a great Armenian restaurant we should go to." You guys, what's Armenian food?
I did wonder that, but I didn't look it up.
All I know about Armenia is the genocide. So
I was just like,
I assume they're eating during that. We all laugh. Genocide.
I've just never heard anyone be like, "You want to get some Armenian food?" I'm like, maybe. What is it?
Yeah.
I need to hear more.
Well, he just assumed because she was a bookseller that she's a classy lady. She has very diverse taste, and she would know what Armenian food would be
You'll
like.
tell me what it is.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm assuming a lot of boiled potatoes.
It just goes to show how like if a woman is interested in what Leonard Nimoy is saying, he doesn't care what he's saying as long as she's interested in it. It's like, "Oh, I had these visions about a screaming lady." She's like, "Wow, tell me more." And he's like, "All right."
He says
this
to
is
her,
working for me.
he goes, "You're a great looking chick." I like that.
Yeah, we talked about this today too. There is a great line where she's about to leave and he tells her, I've got the entire line here because I love the entire line. He's just like, he turns to her and says, I like you. You're warm. You're enthusiastic. And why shouldn't I say the word? You're a great looking chick. And it's like, I mean, weird.
Yeah, there's this, and we'll talk. I know I'm sure you've written it down later on about a women's lib, but this is like a weird theme that's gone through all these shows we've seen in the 70s, where there's this immediate feeling and need to defend themselves as to this attack of like feminism, and it just happens in all these old shows. They're just like, well, like I'm a man, so feminism, am I right? And it's like, what was happening at the time? Like it just has to be in all the shows, and this one's no exception. It's
true. It's they're very worried. Any of these things from the 70s and 80s, there's quite clearly culturally like everyone's worried about gender roles and how they fit, and like they're not opposed to women's liberation, but they're a little confused by it.
Do you guys think that it was like a defensive sentiment of the time that's expressed, or do you think it's just the director writer trying to like put that movement in a box and like be like derisive towards it?
I think it's definitely of the time. Certain shows we've watched have certainly wanted more to put it in a box than others. Like it varies from show to show. I don't know about this one. We'll get into it when we get to the line. Maybe we'll do it now, actually, because it's not important. At some point when they get to this manor, they find out there's a broken old car that's named Gurley that Leonard Nimoy is going to spend the entire show fixing. And because the car's named Gurley, this is when it comes up, is Michelle Brandt. Is that her name? Sure. Michelle Brandt.
Brent. Brent.
Oh, Brent.
Yeah.
She says to Nimoy, she's like, why do men always name their machines that serve them after women? And Leonard Nimoy goes, oh, are you one of those? And she finishes the sentence. She's like, women's liber? No. I'm just open to many views.
Yeah. Well, because you need the viewer to know that there's still a chance that he may be able to sleep with her. Because if she's one of these women lib people, they're equals, and that's just not going to happen. So they just want to pepper this in now. She's not one of those feminazis you guys keep hearing about.
It definitely seems like the writer, by having her preemptively assure the viewer,
yeah,
listen, I know there are women livers out there. I'm not one of them, but it is weird. And I think, to your point, Will, in this particular case, I do think maybe the writer was trying to put it in a box.
Yeah. There were so many like views expressed that I was like, is this of the time or is this of the filmmakers? That I don't know. There's
probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Basically, what this scene is doing is setting up that Michelle and Kovac are now like a team, and they're going to go to Wyndham in Devon.
Not quite yet.
No?
Actually, what this is setting up is that Nimoy has to first turn down his powers because he refuses to go with her, and sort of like, I don't believe it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I only mention it because it is maybe one of my favorite scenes of the movie, because there's a brief scene where he's getting ready for bed and he's about to jump in the shower and he's stripping his shirt off. And I'm just like, are we going to see sexy naked Leonard Nimoy? But the phone rings and kind of distracts him. As he walks past his New York City apartment building window. So you see all of New York. And as he turns around and comes back the other way, they very cleverly like swapped out a image of this like manor castle, this Wyndham at Devon that he has to go to save this woman. And he has this vision, which is actually, I think, pretty well executed. Is he looks at the window and sees it, and he can't stop staring at what should be New York in this, but is this manor. And there's a slow motion like shot of him running to the doors and pounding on them, and then he's running in and riding a spooky elevator up to the top of this manor, and he goes out in this balcony and immediately falls off in this like falls down off these cliff shores into this sea in this like slow motion magical like vision-y moment. And when he hits the water, he immediately wakes up on his apartment room floor just soaking wet.
Yeah.
And he realizes he needs to go see Michelle Brandt because his visions are real.
But there's no other time where he has a vision where he has some sort of
the full interaction?
Yeah, exactly. He has like a lasting element on him, like that when you see someone stabbed, he doesn't end up like waking up with blood on him. It's just this one time where he gets soaking wet.
It is a very promising start to the show that I don't know if they ever fully gone back to, because it was the best vision, and it was like kind of weird and 70s and dreamy, and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun.
I mean, I can't wait to talk about the logic of the visions, so you guys let me know when we're ready to do that.
All right, we'll get into it. Let's move on. But yeah, he has this vision. he immediately goes and visits Michelle Brent again, which is where we see him leaning against a door frame in a white suit jacket to like really wow her. And we kind of know they're going to go to England now and figured out who this woman was screaming, what's happening, what kind of crime is being committed, and how can race car driving Tom Kovac with his new psychic vision save the day.
It's also weird because they've set up this thing that if I was watching this in 1972 or 73, whenever it was, I don't think I'd be that excited to see what happens to this vision. Like, there's nothing that exciting about the vision. Like you're saying, you see a house, a woman screams, and you're like, as if you were going to be like, oh, I got to see why that woman screams. Like, who cares? Who cares? Go back to your race car driving. That's way more exciting.
I don't understand why he did any of this. The only reason he would do any of it is because he wants to, like, sleep with this woman, right?
I mean, you might not be wrong. That might be the subtext of the show.
Also, I mean, we jumped over it a bit, but I don't know if you guys noticed the opening shot of the film is literally a zoom shot. They're talking about being in LA and how they're like they're gonna like leave LA behind, and then there's a zoom shot of like an exit to the airport, but it's in Denver.
Oh, I did notice that. That's funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. There's so much like dialogue around the logic of like what the characters are doing and where they're going, but it's like always inconsistent. So it's like, why?
They're always
spell
cutting
it out?
themselves down.
Yeah, it's amazing.
All right. We're going to get into this now, but I'm going to sort of go into this because they're going to head off to this manor at Wyndham and start trying to solve this mystery. And what we're going to get into here is just like a whole bunch of like supernatural-ish whodunit with so many characters and so many red herrings.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of go through all of the characters who are at this Wyndham Manor so that we don't have to talk about them all individually as we go. We can kind of just like skim through the plot. But like, let me go through all the people who are going to be like hanging around this manor that Leonard Nimoy has to figure out who did what. And
let me just say real quick, it was really weird that all these people are staying at this manor and then they all just want to hang out together. Like, you think they'd just be staying there and then go off to do their own thing during the day, but it's like, I'm going to stay at this manor, like, then I'm just going to like hang out in the lobby and like maybe someone else will come by and we'll like play checkers. It's like, it was just really weird. It was like they were in a weird fraternity.
Yeah, I always found it weird that you would have dinner with like a bunch of strangers and try to make polite, nonsensical conversation. Oh, seems like a nightmare.
This movie's all about that.
Who would spend like a lot of money and time to go to just like
they
hang out in a house
LA
and eat with strangers
to Denver?
Yeah.
To then England to hang out with strangers. So weird. All right, let me get into it. So the first sort of group of characters we need to know about are the screaming woman and her daughter from Nimoy's visions, which is Andrea Glenn, a famous actress for some reason, and her daughter Jennifer. They've been invited to Wyndham by the daughter's estranged father, who she hasn't seen in 11 years. She's only 12 years old, so she's never seen her father. And they're hoping when they get there, they'll get to reconnect and maybe rebuild the family. But when they get there, he's nowhere to be found.
And let me just mention real quick, I know it becomes a plot point later on, but when you first see the little girl, she's dressed so ridiculously with the pigtails and stuff. And I was like, is this how it's supposed to look? Is she supposed to like, it looks like she's a teenager who's being dressed like a 5-year-old. But it ends up being a plot point. So I was like, I guess I'll forgive it. But it's weird.
Yeah, agreed. Also, sorry, how like, I know you guys try not to like spoil the.
That's fine.
It doesn't
Where
matter.
are you
This came out in 1973. It's all right.
I know, but like you don't want to go out of order. Like I was anyway. I'll just ask my question and then you guys can cut it out if you want. But when the mother-daughter walk in to the little cottage where they think the husband-dad is going to be, did you think that old lady in the wheelchair was going to be bad news?
Let's get to that
I'll
real
bring
quick.
her up. She's right here on my list. Yeah. The woman in the cabin is Louise Stanford. She's the only relative of the dad, and she like lives in this little village, and they'll go and visit her when they can't find the dad. And she explains that she was the one who sent the letter because the dad asked her to, and like, oh, he's so busy with work, but I'm here to greet you and make sure everything's going well. I'm sure he'll be along soon. She really is excusing the dad and like kind of welcoming them. But yes, to your question, she seemed very suspicious.
Yeah, I think she seems suspicious, but I didn't think she'd be like, end-level boss.
Oh yeah.
Well, she's wheelchair bound.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the wheelchair threw me for a loop, but I just have like I wasn't sure if there was something like hint in the movie that just made me feel this way, or if it was a like general mistrust of like old British women that I have.
I will say, I think at some point she does say, someone says, and I think it's her, she says, when they can't find her dad that, oh, it's probably because he has some super surprise he's waiting to spring on you. Like, I was just like, oh yeah, that's never goes well.
Yeah. And we'll cut this, but I was sure you were going to say your general mistrust of people in wheelchairs. I was sure you were going to say that.
No, I just find when, like, especially, I don't know why it's especially British, but when someone is just overly polite for no reason and they have all these mannerisms about them being polite, I'm just like, you're going to be bad news. Yeah, you're going to be bad news in this movie.
On to you with your 3 different forks at dinner.
Yeah. What is that about?
All right. Let's get into the next character. One we really won't meet exactly, but the Louise Stanford brings him up when they're trying to figure out where the dad might be. The dad used to have a friend named John John Parrish. He's a bit of a creep, but he used to be good friends with the dad, and no one's seen him in a while. But maybe if we can track him down, he'll know where the dad is.
Yeah, that was weird.
Because he really won't appear until the very end, but people just keep bringing up it, and they keep referring to him as a creep too, which is like very strange.
Yeah, why is the dad hanging out with this guy? Sounds like...
Yeah, I mean, sounds like the dad's probably a creep too if they're
both
friends.
creeps.
Exactly. And then the mom married the creep and had a child with him, and she's hoping to hook up back with him. She made that very clear at the beginning.
It is true.
So it's like, you're kind of, you're not innocent in all of this.
I'd say you bring up a good point, is the daughter's just like, I haven't seen dad in 11 years. I can't wait to see him. Mom, do you think you two will get back together? And she's like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah. No, it's not even like that. She's like, oh, I think we will. Like, she's clearly is waiting for them to get back together, like, which is a weird thing. I mean, just outside of a not very well written pseudo science fiction TV show, but as writing a character, like, you haven't seen someone in a decade, and you just assume, like, yeah, we'll probably get back together.
Yeah, she was like, I spent the last decade getting famous, so I'm gonna show up, and he's been writing me these nice letters now, which turn out to be
suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a weird one. I mean, you think after 11 years you need some sort of parent trap at least to get them back together.
Yeah. Yeah, there's none of that.
No parent traps going on.
Just a cult. And we got the Italian guy. Is he next on your list?
Sure, I'll bring him up next. Signor Vorelli, or as I just wrote in my notes, Italian stereotype.
Yeah, he really is. Like, he might as well be running around with like spaghetti and meatballs in his hands.
Yelling, Mamma Mia.
Yeah.
I thought it was very authentic.
You thought he was authentic?
Yeah.
He's a guest who's staying at the manor as well. He's an engineer, or he claims to be an engineer from Italy who built all the roads in Italy.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, he said, oh, I'm an engineer. In Italy, all roads run to my office because I build all the roads in Italy. And I was like, I don't know if that's how roads work, but...
But he didn't say it like that. What does his voice sound like, Luke?
Well, I can't do accents, you know that.
A pizza pie. It was like that. Pretty good.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for doing the accent work. And the only thing we really learn about him is he loves his wine and port.
Yeah.
He's pretty one note as far as the character goes.
Yeah, port was a plot point for way too long.
There was a long period of time where it seemed like they were trying to distract him, but it was unclear why, because they weren't distracting from anything. And Michelle just keeps asking him about port, and he just keeps talking about port. And I'm like, is this going somewhere? It wasn't.
We should mention this, and I think we've talked about this in some previous, and I think it might be a bit of from the time period, and Luke, I know you're going to get back to your characters. They spend so much time just wasting time on this movie. For a movie that takes a lot of time, takes so much time on setting stuff that doesn't matter, they don't spend any time on things that would matter, like the actual mechanics of the story. And that seems to be, I think, I don't know if it's just of this time period or if it's shows that aren't successful and that's why, but like you're saying, they'll talk for 10 minutes about wine, where then characters will show up, they're like, why are they there? They're like, don't worry about it. We just spent all that time talking about wine. That's what's more important here.
Yeah. I had the same question in my head just about, do they have to connect these dots because, like, I guess, like, we're used to watching films differently, so, like, we have, like, a different setting for, montages and, like, natural connections that they didn't, but, like, there's like, good movies in this,
Yeah, they weren't all bad movies in the 70s.
It's obviously, like...
I felt like
poorly crafted.
I think that's what it is. I felt like someone was like, I'm writing a mystery, so I need to have lots of like distractions, but usually those distractions tie into the plot. Whereas this was just like just distractions, so you don't know what information is important because there's just so much boring information.
Yeah, like we'll talk about the reveal at the end, but even at the end, I was like, who are we talking about right now? Because it was just so many people, and I didn't know who they're talking about, and I was like, okay, wow, that's amazing.
We are currently, I believe, 3 groups of characters into this show.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have 3 or 4 more people to go through to set up who is in this stupid manor.
Yeah.
There's Mr. and Mrs. Tracewell, a pair of newlywed guests who are hanging out at the manor with everybody. They're very
selling drugs on the side.
Selling drugs on the side. They're very cagey about what their business is, and at some point we'll find they have a case of drugs in their car, and where Nimoy is pretty sure these are a couple drug dealers hanging out here.
He looks like the guy in the couple looks like he's one of the monkeys.
Yeah.
Very floppy hair. I don't know if either of you noticed this. The first time we see that couple, they're trying to rush to catch the elevator in the manor, and it turns around. She's dressed normally. He is wearing a very short robe and nothing else.
Yeah, that's right.
I just assumed they were coming back from the pool.
That's what I thought too.
Oh, maybe. Is there a pool there? I've seen no indications to.
Well,
there's an ocean.
The place they're filming at clearly does not have the ocean behind them, but when you see it, but they tell you, yes, by the way, don't look past the house. There's an ocean back, the ocean. But yeah, I guess they have a pool too. Why not?
I don't know. I was just baffled. I'm like, wait, who is this man and why is he wearing no clothing?
Did you say you were baffled?
I was baffled. That's why the show's so aptly named, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's keep going. Next up, there's Hopkins the Butler. Don't worry about him, though, because at some point Nimoy says, he's a nice guy, don't worry about him. And we don't for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Why does he think he's a nice guy again?
I don't know.
He has one comment where they connect on some level.
It's just because the writer was like, well, we just want to get him out. So they're just like, don't worry about him. He's a good guy.
Well, at some point, the owner of the place is going to throw Nimoy out. So Hopkins goes up to, see Nimoy at the door, and he's like, are you ready to go, Mr. Kovac? And he's just like, I haven't packed my bags yet. And the man's like, all right, well, I guess I'll pack your bags so I can throw you out. And Nimoy just walks away. He's like, hey, nice guy. He's packing my bags for me. He's like, no, you're getting tossed out of this hotel. Anyway, that guy pops up occasionally, but very clearly not important. I actually think when Michelle makes that a meta wink at the camera, she's like, this time, it's not the butler. Wink. I actually think that is the line.
Oh, okay. I'll have to rewatch it. I'll never rewatch it.
And then the final character I'll go into is the woman who runs the manor, this little vacation spot, Mrs. Faraday.
Mm-hmm.
She's an older woman, but she's pretty frisky, and she is also always around to provide helpful information to force this plot to move forward.
Yeah.
It's also, I mean, again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but when you find out what she's actually intending in this film, it's strange that she would accept all these other
guests to arrive as one of the masterminds.
It only makes her life way more challenging.
And let me just throw this in now, and it's going to ruin a bit of a plot, but you find out through this movie that she's slowly getting younger.
Yeah.
But did anyone else think she actually looked younger? I thought she looked exactly the same.
Oh no, I thought she looked good.
Yeah,
did she?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought she just looked like a 45-year-old woman the whole movie.
No, they age her up a lot at the start.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, it's just me,
You just think anyone over 40 is hideous.
I guess.
I actually kind of recognized it before it was even a plot point. I was like, oh my gosh, this Madame looks surprisingly
Young.
good today.
Yeah,
And
no,
then-
I did too. I was just like, whoa, did Mrs. Faraday get hot?
Yeah, she did
She did.
at the expense of.
Anyway, so this is all the characters. Nimoy and Michelle are going to arrive here now and sort of set up shop to kind of figure out what's happening here and who the screaming woman is.
But they're trying to do it in secret.
There is an element that we're not going to too much, but there's a moment where they're driving into the London, and it's a very dumb scene where she's driving and women can't drive, so Nimoy has to be scared the whole time. But they come up with some sort of plan where they're going to arrive separately for some reason.
Yeah, they it didn't make any sense because later in the movie the woman's upset about it, but they both want to arrive separately so people don't think they're together and that they've just met for no reason. There's no reason. It doesn't change anything. But then later on in the movie, what's her name? Faraday's like, wait a minute, I don't like people lying to me. They knew each other ahead of time. It's like, what? Who cares? It's so weird.
It's bizarre on many levels because the scene doesn't need to exist except for to show us that women don't know how to drive, and B, as soon as they have this whole plot to arrive in separate convoys and then immediately hang out with each other the whole time.
Yeah, 24
they're
hours a
together.
day.
Yeah, but then it's the impetus for the Madame to throw them out at the end. But again, she didn't need to invite them in the first place because it only it's of course she wants to throw them out because she wants to get them out of their hair. But they also didn't need to be invited anyway. So it's
You could have said
it's
rooms full.
all insane.
Yeah.
It's
She brought it on herself.
Yeah.
She got greedy. All right.
Self-perpetuating, horrible writing.
Yeah. We get one of these first scenes where the guests all join each other for dinner, which you were talking about earlier, this baffling scene where they enjoy dinner together. I'm going to say baffling all the time. Jennifer, the daughter, she excuses herself from the dinner because she's not hungry. And the mom proceeds to tell them a little meet cute about how she met the husband while they were acting in London and their creep friend was there, et cetera, et cetera. But this is really just a setup because we cut away from the dinner and Jennifer hasn't gone to bed. She's snuck outside to a creepy old shed in the backyard. And waiting there is a man who says he's her father.
Yeah. Just in the line of creepiness as well. The mother admits that she met the husband because he was staring into her dressing room from across the hall, from across the
Another building.
window. Yeah. So again, just another example of how this mother is complicit in the line of creeps that are like tormenting her daughter.
She loves creeps and she's birthed herself a little creep.
Did you guys not get paused by that story of like how they fell in love? I was like, wow, that's super.
It seemed fine. It seemed fine to me.
It was weird. You're not wrong because across the hall and they get married. She says like 3 days later.
Yeah,
like it is quite the meet cute she's describing. But I wasn't surprised.
She can't wait to hook back up with him though.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised. He left after the daughter was born. I'm like, yeah, he's you married him after 3 days. He's a scumbag.
But in this shed, he gives her like a weird what do you call it, like stamp thing for like stamping wax. What do you call that?
Oh, a seal.
He gives her a seal, but it's like a necklace.
Yeah, it's like a little pendant, I think.
A pendant, yeah.
Yeah, he gives a little pendant of a wolf, and she sort of tells him, and he tells his daughter that he has to hide from their mother. She can't tell her mother that he's arrived because people are after him, and he's trying to protect them. So she has to keep this all a secret. And there's a line of dialogue here that he tells to her that like someone grooming a child for like something terrible. Because his line is, he turns to this little girl and says, "You'll have to be strong. In some ways. You'll have to give up being a child. You'll have to keep a number of secrets from your mother." I was just like, this is how you get molested.
Well, you did sort of think that might have been what was going to happen, but it's not. It's much more sinister. The occult.
Yeah, did you guys know that the wolf was a sign of the occult?
I did not.
Because every time that little wolf thing shows up on screen, there's like there's a lot of music doing a lot of work throughout the whole movie.
I love the music in this. The music is so over the top, and we didn't talk about the opening credits, which are just like a montage of stuff you're going to see, and they go on for 23 minutes or so, the credits, and it's just the most 70s music ever, and then proceeds through the rest of the show.
Oh yeah. The fast zooms with like the dun like when you see the wolf pendant. I was like, okay.
So
that's
the
important.
Wolf pendant is bad.
That's important. Noted.
Yeah, we get it.
I've been watching. Yes, I understand. Anyway, after dinner, old Andrea tries to track down her daughter, but she can't quite find him, and she's wandering around the manor, and she checks in with Mrs. Faraday to be like, "Hey, have you seen Jen anywhere?" Pops her into this room, and we see Mrs. Faraday, and she's playing a piano, or as she clavichord, as she repeatedly tells everyone.
What I love though that it seemed like a scene that people are like, well, they're British, right? It's the like old things like what was popular in the 1500s? Clavichords. That's what she's playing. Like she would be playing a clavichord.
She could be doing anything else.
Yeah, I know.
Like she could be holding a cat or making tea, and then she's making like it could have been anything.
Well, that's the thing.
Like
there's no reason for it. It's so they can say clavichord, and then later on be like, was someone playing a clavichord? They're like, nope, and that's it.
Well, that's what happens here. She leaves when she doesn't know where Jennifer is. Goes out to the shed, finds Jennifer's little stuffed toy. Comes back in to ask Miss Faraday again. Hey, are you sure you didn't see her? Walks back in and like, there's no clavichord in the room anymore. And she's like, wasn't there a clavichord in here? And Miss Faraday's like, nope, never been a clavichord in this house ever. And it's a little bit of gaslighting is going on. Also,
to no end.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. There's like you could cut this out. There's no point to this at all. It's not like this comes up later that she just keeps doing that to her. Like didn't there used to be a door here? No. Like it never happens again. She's just like one time she thought it'd be funny to pretend that she had a clavichord.
Yeah, it's amazing that they go like from gaslighting to like hard poison for no reason. It's like, oh, we're gonna make you think you're crazy, so everyone else around you thinks you're crazy. But like, no, just like straight to the poison. Like 2 scenes later.
Did you hear? She thought there was a clavichord.
Yeah.
All right, let's give her the poison. The plan is coming together perfectly.
Do you think my hypothesis on it is that the director showed up? I'm putting a lot on the director here, guys, so I apologize to.
You can
No one,
apologize
but-
to the guy's name we don't know.
Yeah.
He died. He killed himself shortly after this movie was released.
But for sure, he showed up in this location, saw the clavichord, and was like, "We're gonna work this in.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure out a way."
Get
to
the
use this
80s over
clavichord."
here. Let's see if we have time. Target of opportunity. Let's get this clavichord in at the end of the day.
We also kind of see now at this sort of after this brief bit of gaslighting, she gets back to her room and her Jennifer, her daughter, gives her a little prank. She jumps out and gives her a little spook, little fun little prank. And she keeps calling her mother and like is basically not behaving like she used to. Like she's behaving much more like a snooty, uppity teenager suddenly. And the mom can't quite figure out why, but she seems to be growing up rather quickly.
And she looks slightly different. They've taken the pigtails out of her hair.
And she has a whole new wardrobe that her mom didn't know about.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. The next
She
morning,
went shopping overnight.
The next morning, Nimoy and Michelle see her walking out of the manor, and I thought it was a different character. They're like, hey, check her out. And Michelle's just like, it took me 3 years to go from 12 to 15. And it took me forever.
Best line of the movie.
I was like, what happened? It took you 3 years to go from 12 to 15? And I'm like, oh, you're saying she's older.
Yeah, I didn't understand the plot point, but after I understood that she was, her age was being robbed from her, I rethought of that line. I was like, oh, that's like the best line in the movie. Too bad it's going to fall. Like, too bad you
falls
don't
so
understand what's
flat.
happening.
You're
Yeah.
right, though. I kept going back to that line. I'm like, that's actually a pretty good line.
Yeah.
It's very effectively portraying what they needed to. They just don't know how to implement it at all.
Yeah. It's like she changed her clothes and aged 3 years, and everyone noticed simultaneously.
If only they knew how to shoot it so we understood that was what was happening.
Well, they took out her pigtails. Guys, what are you complaining about?
Yeah, that's,
Pigtails in, pigtails out. Clearly, you've aged 3 years.
pigtails equals puberty or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's right. She's gone all the way through puberty overnight. She's not being groomed for anything weird at all. It's totally fine. Nimoy and Michelle at this point kind of take a little trip and follow her down to the ocean side where she's headed to because Nimoy has a weird feeling she's up to something evil. And as he's walking out there, he starts having a vision.
it's my favorite scene in the movie.
Is this the white liquid in the red glass? Is that
Yeah.
yeah, it's gross.
I just love him with his acting when he's like staring off and like trying to really hard to concentrate to get his vision to come back, and he's just doing this like amazing eye acting, and the British woman who's just encouraging him incessantly, you just have to focus, and he's just like, I mean, if you haven't already, please YouTube and wait, I'm gonna find the actual time code. So
Oh, don't worry. We will put this on the Instagram as a moving video so everyone can watch it.
amazing.
I already have it highlighted in red to put it on Instagram.
Do you? Amazing. What was your guys' reaction to that scene?
I enjoyed it too. I loved her coaching him through it, like how to focus his eyes on the vision, and then all we get is like a green leaf squeezing white liquid into a red glass. And I was like, all right.
To be fair, he has very little to work with. He just has to like the scene is him just looking constipated. That's his acting he gets to do.
Yeah.
What is he gonna look like?
I like the visions though because they're like cryptic enough and they're kind of like shot in a fun 70s way that I'm like, oh, these are kind of weird and like occulty, I guess.
It's also another example of how the visions are inconsistent, because in this, like, he doesn't ever use his like ability to refocus and bring the visions back. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we found out something new about how this vision works, but
Don't worry about it.
Irrelevant.
Well, and it becomes a plot point later on because later on he has another, like, they sort of like play with it. And it's like, now he can like control things. Like, now he can't. We just wasted some time. This is the same as it always was.
Again, I'm jumping ahead, but I just can't wait to talk about it. The red herring vision, where he has a vision of the bloody.
Well, we can talk about that now. Obviously, we're trying to figure out who's perpetrating all these gaslighting and stuff, and Signor Italian Stereotype is obviously one of the suspects. And at some point, they walk past him, and Nimoy has a vision while looking at him, and he sees him covered in blood. Mm-hmm. But then later, he has a second vision, which reveals
that he's a butcher in real life. So his vision is just telling him things about the world that will throw him off the scent of the right killer.
He wastes a lot of time worrying about this man covered in blood to realize, oh, he's just a butcher. He's not an engineer who built roads. He's a guy who lies about his job.
And then the moment when he's like, I know who you really are. He's a butcher.
It is funny, though, that they seem to... The whole point of the show is, wouldn't it be cool if there's a race car driver who has visions? And you're like, yeah, that is kind of cool. That's fun. That's a fun week-to-week show. But then they were like, how do the visions work? Like, don't worry about it. They'll change from scene to scene. And they're not, like... You think the idea is that he only sees visions of things that he may be able to change, like premonitions of the future. But that wasn't a premonition of the future. That was just something about the guy.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it's just a factoid about it.
It's just like, well...
It's a pop-up video.
Is there going to be an episode later on in the future where the whole time you think he's saving someone, it's like, oh no, they're just a lifeguard. They weren't drowning. Like, oh, that was a good episode.
Yeah, it's a great point, because if he's driving like race cars and then all of a sudden he gets like a vision of just like
stuff,
someone taking their dog for a walk and he almost crashes, like it's going to be a really annoying vision that's like very hazardous to
really going to interfere with his
vocation.
racing career.
Yeah.
But speaking of how these visions help, the white liquid in the red glass this time, I don't know how they made this leap, but as soon as he figures out what he's seeing, he's just like, oh no, someone's trying to poison that actress.
Well, she what's her face is also an expert on plants, Michelle. She's like, he explains a plant to her and she's like, and then they go to like a greenhouse and she knows that it's a poisonous plant.
Oh yeah, she's like, that plant, it's a plant that's often used in occult rituals.
Yeah.
And they rush off to stop poor Andrea Glenn from drinking this poison, because now that she's seen a clavicard, it's time to poison her. And I love them rushing in because they're like, all right, we have to get that glass out of her hand. What's the simplest way to do that? And they come up with the most convoluted way of doing that.
Oh, yeah, this is when he has to ask her for an autograph?
And like, it just goes on and on. He's like, will you sign it? Oh, do you have a pen? Where's this? And he like, during this whole thing, he knocks the glass over. And it just goes on for so long and is really weird and annoying. And even it seems like the show was aware of that, because Andrea Glenn basically turns to him after he's done all this and she's just like, are you going to apologize? And he just tries to laugh it off. She's like, no, I'm serious. You should apologize to me. This is fucked up.
I also didn't understand why she needed to be poisoned, because even when they do successfully poison her, she's like sick for a few days or a day or something. And then she's fine again. And it's not like she wanted to leave, or it wasn't like, you would think like the poisoning was like a ploy to like keep them there.
Well, the funny thing about the poisoning is clearly Miss Faraday, that's the owner, right? She wants to kill the actress here, or that's what you find out, that this whole thing is killing her. But then later on, they need a signature from her.
Yeah, that
so
was
like, well, if they killed her, then they would never get her signature.
Well, that's the thing. And this poison, it doesn't kill her. It just incapacitates her for a couple days. Because what'll happen, she doesn't drink this poison, but as soon as they knock this one over, Mrs. Faraday walks in and is like, oh, orange juice? And she just drinks that and immediately gets poisoned again. Like, they don't even stop the poisoning.
Wouldn't it be funny if every scene with a woman, they just keep poisoning her? She's like, I really don't want to, no, have this juice too. And then she's poisoned again for 3 more days.
Well, and after she's kind of poisoned, like, Jennifer and Mrs. Faraday start hanging out. Like, there's a weird scene where Mrs. Faraday, or she's talking to Mrs. Faraday, Jennifer's like, hey, can you like get some boys up in here? I'd love to have some boys in this manor. Can you hook me up, Mrs. Faraday? And Mrs. Faraday at this point is looking younger, so obviously whatever's happening, she's stealing the youth from this child, right? Yeah. That's a plot point that isn't the plot. Like, this show isn't about stopping a woman from stealing a child's youth. It never comes up. Like, it's just happening. But it's not the plot. Right?
So, like, Mrs. Faraday has that one scene when she meets the bad guy, and she's like, oh, I feel so great. And
yeah, so young.
You'll keep it happening, right? And
they make out in the wine cellar.
Yeah, very awkward makeout. Maybe that should be on YouTube. Can I request things for YouTube?
Sure, of course.
Yeah. I love that.
That was a weird. But yeah, I guess that's what she's helping this dad who's doing something to affect some plan, and what she's getting out of it, what Miss Faraday's getting out of it, is she's getting youthful. So I guess that's her stake in it, is she's helping whatever this evil dad's up to. He's trading his, I guess, daughter's youth in exchange for it.
And he wants money, like, and also, I mean, whatever. We won't get into that yet either, but I mean, to follow the plot point of the poisoning through, the doctor shows up, and Leonard Nimoy's character isn't willing to tell the mom that someone's trying to poison her, but will tell the doctor exactly what has given her this affliction.
Making him look as guilty as possible.
Yeah, and then the doctor's like, I'll come to my own conclusion. Then comes back and like, how did you know the exact thing that was? And then what was it? What does he respond with? He just kind of ignores him, and the whole poisoning plot line goes away.
Yeah, well,
He's like, get out of here, man. And then
the doctor's just like, it's an accident anyway. Bye.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that poisoning subplot goes nowhere. She gets better, but it's really weird. Like, the poisoning, all it really does seem to set up is, I guess Nimoy and Michelle start, like, I don't know what they've been doing. They've been fixing that car up till now, but they kind of start investigating. Because there's a scene here where Michelle's like, we better do some investigating. Why don't I go to London and I'll look into this John Parrish creep everyone keeps talking about, which you think is going to divide them up for a few scenes? No. She goes to London
For like one scene.
and is back with Leonard Nimoy in the following. Like, it's like, why did you even bother splitting the characters up?
Yeah, is that like the night that she leaves? What happens that night? She's gone for one night.
He's still fixing the car.
She comes back and he's fixing the car. Is that when he falls off the cliff?
Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it is, because she goes there and she finds out that John Parrish owns some sort of occult bookstore that burnt down, and she breaks in and some helpful police officer catches her breaking in, and he's just like, oh, hey, yeah, that guy, he died here. Don't worry about it.
The police officer didn't seem to care at all that she was there. He's like, oh, this is an abandoned, dangerous building. And she's like, yeah, I'm just looking around. He's like, seems fine to me, as you were.
How about a little plot information while you're here? But yeah, you're right. That's right. She's gone, and while she's gone, Leonard Nimoy follows the little girl to the cliffsides in the middle of the night, because that's what you do. It's not creepy at all.
I don't know how he didn't see that being a trap.
But yeah, he kind of follows her out, and like she's like luring him, like she's covering her mouth and like screaming, help me, Tom Kovac. And he's like crawling. He's like, I guess, going down this like staircase down the side of this cliffside to the sea. I guess this is one of those English cliffsides where you had to walk down to the ocean. And at some point, what does he do? He like leans over on a railing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
she
super
hides-
rickety looking railing.
Yeah, she's hiding like below him on the rocks and is like, help me. And then when he leans over to try to see, the railing has been cut and he falls over into the ocean.
Yeah.
But he falls like 250 feet.
Don't worry, he's
And
fine
is
though.
totally
It really doesn't
fine.
do anything.
And also, we cut away when he's like in the water, like we think he might drown. And then the next time we see him, he's like back fixing the car.
Yeah.
He's
Totally fine.
Yeah.
He literally does, like, he falls so far, theoretically. I mean, I think you said this to me earlier, well, like, they cut to the person hitting the water, and it looks like he just jumped off a dock or something.
Yeah.
But, like, it's like, he falls off this huge cliff, no apparent way out, smash cut to the next morning, just fixing that car again.
Well, it's because they had to follow up on the vision that he had seen, right? So they were like, oh, we got to get that part of the vision. Remember he got really wet? Yeah, throw that in there. It doesn't have any... There's no repercussions, though.
That scene where he like pretends takes a shower needed to pay off, and that's all that's driving that scene. I mean, if you look at that scene, and obviously trying to break down the logic of the movie is unfruitful, and we all know this at this point. But when he's following her, the only motivation that the teenager has to like hurt him is if she's in full control by like the witch or the devil or whatever, the occult.
Yeah.
And if they are trying to hurt Leonard Nimoy, that means that they're aware that he's a threat to them.
Yeah, they're onto him.
So now this person is like in full control of the occult, by the occult, and then that Leonard Nimoy is like a threat. But then nothing happens in the next like rest of the movie that indicates that A, this like little girl is in full control of the occult, by the occult, and B,
they're onto him.
Yeah, that they're onto him. Yeah.
Well, she did try to get him wet. So that was something.
That was just another prank she was playing,
Yeah.
like when she spooked her mom. She's very funny when she gets older. She loves to prank everybody.
Mm-hmm.
She hates her dolls that she liked the day before. That was the other aging thing. I don't need this anymore.
I'm not a child.
Yeah.
I don't need childish things anymore. I'm a grown-up who wants boys in this manner.
And to kill Leonard Nimoy.
The one thing all girls want, to kill Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, poor Leonard. But this sets up, it's like, it's time for a ride in the old car.
Yeah, it's time for a ride in the old car. And the reason they're going is unclear. Like, Michelle and him just seem to be going to get away from the manor for a few hours. That, like, they're theoretically investigating what they think is going to be a murder, but they decide, hey, you finally fixed that car you've been working on.
Yeah, let's go for a drive.
All movie. Let's go for a quick drive. And they take a little drive out to the countryside. They stop to take a little chat on the sort of, like, country road. And while they're chatting, some van comes out of nowhere and like smashes Gurley the car into a ditch or something. Like it all happens off screen. It's really
it doesn't
weird.
happen off screen. There's like a van that they go and inspect, and then they don't hear a crash or anything like that. But like when they look over, their car is in a ditch.
Right.
That
They-
was
they
like
don't ever
5
explain
feet
it.
away from
Yeah.
them.
They don't
They would have
explain it.
heard or seen, but
Yeah.
but whatever. The occult,
They call it. Nobody's in the van. Nimoy goes to like pull the car out of the ditch, I guess, and Michelle just like hangs out next to the van the entire time, and like the van door opens, and someone just reaches out with a really long cane and just smacks her on the face,
Yeah.
knocking her unconscious and kidnapping her, which is, I guess, a setup because he's a race car driver. I guess you need to have a scene that requires his driving skills in order to like justify why you set up.
This is
that
the
character.
only reason he's a race car driver. It's for this scene here. So it's like every episode he's going to be in like a cool car. It's going to be a cool chase. Like I think it's just that time period. It's like, wouldn't it be fun if there's a lot of car chases?
I'll say this. I really enjoyed this car chase. It broke up some of the monotony of having to listen to people talk. Just watching this van and this car. It's like a 1927 Benz, I think.
no, it's a
It's a 27 Bentley.
Bentley.
yeah.
And neither of these cars have any shocks. And they are ripping around off-road. These things are jiggling, barely holding together. I thought that van was going to fall over so many times.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It's this like insane off-road crash that culminates in the most hilarious shot of ramming a car I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think the idea is that Leonard Nimoy is a great driver, and he does like a slight little turn of the wheel, and then we cut to the actual like wide of the car chase, and it's this big dramatic move where this car is like forcing the van off the road, and it's no shocks, and then we cut back to Leonard Nimoy perfectly still, just slightly moving the steering wheel to the right.
I have another question about the car chase though. If you stay at an old English manor, you're just allowed to drive their old like antique cars? That's just part of it?
Yeah, I think so, because they make you dinner every time. It's like all inclusive.
Yeah, you fixed it up.
Like he never asked. He just took the car. He just took the car for a very dangerous car chase.
He fixed it up. Although, Will, what did you notice when you were watching him fix the car?
Right before the whole woman's lib line, he's just hitting the rim with a hammer.
Well, that's
he's
what
like,
was wrong
it's
with
all
it.
done. He's like, yeah, hit it enough times with the hammer.
Yeah, but then you got to take this old jalopy out and rip around off-road. I mean, that would have been a lot of fun. I would have loved watching that car jump over those jumps. Oof, a lot of fun. Anyway, very awkwardly rams his car off the road, saves Michelle. There's no one in the van now. This whole like kidnapping subplot was just to fill up another 10 minutes of the show.
Yeah, he needed to drive the car. She needed to let him drive the car so that they would drive to the van that was just waiting there for them and irresistible to look into. So
That's
that
it.
they could.
They literally had to get in the car just to set up something. So a car chase that doesn't matter and has no repercussions.
It's so crazy.
But the Italian guy comes running in. He's all sweaty, so he looks guilty.
He looks guilty, but we know he's a butcher, so he's off our suspect list. There's a little moment now after they do this. They just like keep trying to find ways to put occult stuff in. Like they're having another like meeting. Like him and Michelle have so many meetings about like, what do we know? What are we aware of? What are all the clues we have? And they sit around talking about it, and they're talking about the dead dad or the dad who, where is he? Why didn't he show up? Why did he invite them here? And Leonard Nimoy writes the dad's name on a piece of paper because he's tracking all of his notes. And he looks down and he's like, I wrote he's dead. I automatic wrote on this piece of paper, so I guess he must be dead, so we're not looking for him. Like there's just like all kinds of these weird things that are like, take his name off the suspect list because I psychically wrote his name and he's dead.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
There's a lot of weird stuff in here.
Also, we learned that his power is not trustworthy. So, but he's convinced that this guy is actually dead. They are I think we should highlight how terrible detectives that they are, though.
Well, she does at least a little bit of detective work. He does none. He just sees a vision and then he like walks around and fixes a car. She at least gets a bus and takes it. I know she also couldn't drive that old car. She goes to London and tries to find something about people, but he doesn't do any detective work at all.
No. I mean, they finally clear the Treadwells, this newlywed couple who they looks like have drugs in the back of their car, so they finally confront them about it. And what's kind of revealed is like, oh, we're just door-to-door cosmetic salesmen.
Yeah.
Who we didn't want to tell anyone that because we think this place is too posh for salesmen. Like like they wave their hand and they're like, all right, wasn't them. They're just some regular old cosmetic salesmen.
Yeah.
Like it's really weird. Like we spent all this time studying these characters and it's unclear what's happening. And then they just wave them away with the weirdest explanations. It's such a strange way of dealing with this plot.
Yeah, I feel like Leonard Nimoy showed up and they're like, all right, we're going to be detectives. And he's like, hey, I'm the guy with the visions. You're going to be the one doing all the detective work.
They do a little checking into old Mrs. Stanfield, the old lady in the wheelchair they were checking up on. They shop by her house and ask her housekeeper, like, hey, anything weird about this lady other than this weird that she's got like all these photos of the actress in this weird, like, what is it, shrine she's built to her?
Yeah.
And she also has a signed photograph of John Parrish in the shrine too. And the housekeeper's just like, huh? Anything weird? I don't know. She's only been here 2 weeks, so.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, she hasn't lived here as long as possible, so surprise, she's a bad person.
That shrine was hilarious too, because earlier in the movie when they go to that cabin and the shrine's there, and she's like, oh, it's the photos of you, and she's like, yeah, why wouldn't it be? I'm like, well, you haven't seen this guy in 12 years. Apparently you got married after like 2 weeks, and he's got like this shrine to you, and it wasn't
Yeah, not weird at all.
not alarming.
They race back to the manor because they're like very suspicious of this Mrs. Stanford now. And when they get there, they hear a wheelchair riding the elevator. So they do the only natural thing when you hear a wheelchair on an elevator. You work your way down to the basement, and then you find a door that goes into the bottom of the elevator, like underneath the elevator shaft, and then you get locked in there. So you're now removed from the movie for like the next 20 minutes. Like,
But it's an excuse to not use his power again.
it was so weird that they would like hear the woman. They're like, oh, I hear a wheelchair. She's on that elevator. And they just proceed to go down into the basement and then get themselves locked underneath. I'm like, wait, why are you doing any of this?
Yeah, it's like so insane and illogical and hilarious. Like I was laughing out loud watching it, but I'm trying to think about how to convey over a podcast how amazingly, hilariously nonsensical it is.
Well, it's like there's still 20 minutes of this movie left. Our characters would know they should go confront her, but we need to stop them with some sort of obstacle. What if they just did the opposite of what you think they would do and get trapped in a closet for a bit?
It's also clear that the elevator is going up and they go down.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh no, what if we get swished out of this elevator? I'm like, yeah, why did you go down there ever?
Which was the least tense scene ever, wasn't it? When the elevator's coming down, I was like, oh, are they going to get squished? Of course they're not. It's the slowest elevator ever. And then it stops for some reason.
Well, it stops like 6 feet above
Yeah.
their head too. Like it doesn't even come down that far. It's like, oh, I guess we won't get squished. We'll be okay.
I know, it's like the second thing that Mission Impossible borrowed from, though. The elevator shaft and
the finale.
Yeah.
Oh, it really owes Mission Impossible a thing. Now that we've got them locked in a closet in the basement, we rush to the climax of like what's been happening to Andrea, like without our heroes anywhere to be seen. But essentially, Jen drops by her sleeping mother's bed and says, hey, guess what, Mom? Dad's here. I've been hanging out with him all week, and he's finally ready to talk to you. You just got to go downstairs. Mrs. Faraday helps her out of bed and helps her onto the elevator. And when they get to the top floor, like of this balcony overlooking the ocean, kind of what we saw in Nimoy's vision, Andrea meets Mrs. Stanford again, and she's in her wheelchair, and she kind of reveals her whole nefarious plot, like what this has all been about. You want me to break this down for you?
Yeah, break it down, because honestly, all my notes are like, I have a note here. I'm doing a really bad job at following what this mystery is. Because it's so, they spend as much time on red herrings, but not even red herrings like if you're reading like a Raymond Chandler novel or something, where it all kind of makes sense, at least in the world they've created. These are just red herrings and time wasters and subplots that mean nothing, don't make any sense, and are just weird things that characters do just to kill time. So like, oh yeah, by the way, I know we just wasted an hour and a half of your time, but here's what the mystery is.
All right.
Yeah, I think it is like this movie, if you took out the things that made no sense or like were really unneeded to the storyline, this is like a 7.5 minute movie.
Yeah.
This is like a Bravo fact.
A little insider baseball. That's a Canadian short film. All right.
That's no longer in existence.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore, so it's very topical.
This is like a Bravo fact in 1993. Am I right?
All right. So here's what Louise Stanford reveals from her wheelchair. She says, the dad is dead. We already knew that. She says she sent the letter inviting them here, and everything's been a ploy. That she's been gaslighting Andrea for the purposes of making everyone at the hotel think she's crazy.
Which has not been happening at all.
So that she can throw her off a balcony and it'll make it look like a suicide because she's gone crazy. But you're right. They've not been gaslighting her. But like the one that, what is it? The
clavichord.
The clavichord. That one time everyone said she saw a clavichord. Like, oh, clearly she's crazy. And she'll
Well,
kill
that's
herself.
the thing. You
That
think they would have
actually
spent
makes
any
more sense
time.
than I thought.
They would have spent some time on that of there's a whole bunch, and maybe even the a bunch of things are. It's an old castle. There's people coming in and out, secret doorways, all these things you could do to make someone think they're crazy, and like they sort of at the end thing, like it's almost like a Scooby-Doo thing, like who was it? It was the janitor, and he pulls off his face. You're like, oh, okay.
Before she dies, though, she has to sign over some papers assigning custody of Jennifer to Louise before she dies. And
is it custody or the money?
Here's the thing. They posit two explanations. There's some explanation at the end that maybe she was after Andrea's like vast acting wealth, which is weird. How much money can you're rich, but you're not like a billionaire.
SAG, man.
Yeah, the SAG, oh man, those residuals, they really add up. But this is what she says is what she's really after. Is Louise wants to take custody of Jennifer because she wants to exploit Jennifer's unusual spiritual abilities.
Yeah.
Which have not appeared in any way, shape, or form. And from this point forward, they'll be like, yeah, Jennifer's a crazy psychic that we need to get control of. I'm like, what do you, the little girl? What?
Yeah.
How?
I know, they're like, yeah, by the way, she's a psychic. And you're like, but when? Why did that happen? Where? And it's like, no, she's a psychic. All right, move on.
Yeah, this is what they're trying to exploit. This whole thing has been about getting a hold of Jennifer's latent psychic abilities.
Yeah, but there is like one scene that they bring it up, right? Like there's like a scene before where they're like, oh yeah, like you have it in your like blood or something.
Yeah, I do remember this too. In retrospect, they were saying like her dad had these fits too, or these problems too. And I thought they were just referring to her being like a jerky teen. But you're right. I think what they were trying to
set it up.
A bad seeding of this thing.
Yeah, horrible setup for
no payoff.
Yeah.
And there's one final twist of this moment where Louise stands up out of her wheelchair. She's not a cripple after all.
Yeah.
What a reveal.
And she Mission Impossible's it big time.
Yeah, she like rips her prosthetic face off.
Well,
to reveal.
That's it. She'll do this, but we kind of have to get Nimoy up there because he's still stuck in this closet in the basement. But essentially, what happens is Nimoy and Michelle spend so much. There's so many cutaways, just like not being able to get out of the basement. And you alluded to this earlier, Jordan. She tries to talk him through how to like use his psychic abilities to like
unlock the door,
basically. And they go through this whole thing where it's like, imagine what's on the other side of the door. I see a bolt. All right, now really focus on the bolt. And Leonard Nimoy screams, "Open sesame," because he's such a joker. And the door's still locked. But the Italian stereotype just happened to be walking by, so he just like lets them out of the closet. It's such a weird like lit down. Like they like build up this whole thing like you're gonna use your powers to open the door, and then someone just walks by and happens to open the door.
Well, that was the thing. They set it up like they were gonna build up that over time, or at least over the time of this movie, his powers were developing, and now not only does he see visions, but he can control things with his mind. Like no, he can't. But we're gonna spend a scene showing you that, and then go, just kidding. He still sees people's careers.
I think like the director thought it was a hilarious joke.
There's a lot of humor in here.
Open sesame, and then the Italian guy's like, "Hey."
Yeah, that's a hilarious joke.
Yeah,
hey.
there's the humor in this is hard to pinpoint. They're not even jokes. It's just people kind of say things, and then Leonard Nimoy kind of smirks about it. I'm like, I guess that was funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nimoy is out of the closet with Michelle. They're running upstairs to like save the day. Along the way, they bump into Jennifer, who I don't know. She's just wandering around the hallways, and
no, she's with the person running. This is the part that I also like really didn't understand. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go.
What's the girl who runs the estate's name again?
Mrs. Faraday.
Mrs. Faraday and Jennifer and the daughter show up, and Leonard Nimoy and like his detective partner are there, and they're like, "Hey, stop!" And then she runs like the Mrs. Faraday runs away. And we don't see her. We cut to her like she's in a car driving away later, but she just leaves this like who she's been positioning apparently for like the whole movie is this child that she can steal her youth from, and she just abandons it. And like the only thing that's doing her whole plot is like she just runs away from. And then anyway, sorry to cut you off.
Well, he tackles the little girl, breaks the amulet, seems to break her curse or whatever it is.
No, she doesn't. He doesn't even tackle her. It's like amazing that he only can touch it by crossing his arms.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then so he can't touch as soon as he gets about to touch the medallion that is mind controlling this girl. He gets really close and she runs away because Satan has full control over her. But Satan is kind of a klutz and falls on her way up the stairs. And when she falls, she smashes the medallion, thus freeing her from the spell. And then we
cut away to Mrs. Faraday.
Yeah, we see Mrs. Faraday who's just like fleeing the scene of the crime. But then she's old again because the
she got her comeuppance is what happens. Like, hey, you're old. You might have got away, but you're old now.
I have a question. We cut away to her. We see her look in the mirror. She's like, I'm old again. Oh no. And we see the car drive off. Was I mistaken? I thought I heard like a sound design of a car like veering off the road. I thought they were trying to imply she drove off a cliff.
Oh, I didn't.
Maybe
catch
I
that.
read into that.
I think she's fine. I think she's just
Old.
she's old, so that's the worst punishment you can get. Osteoporosis. There's the word.
It would have been amazing if she became a paraplegic, so she became the old woman in the wheelchair for real. That the other her co-conspirator was.
That actually would have been better. At least there'd been some sort of like, I guess that came full circle. There always has to be a lady in a wheelchair, but it's not. It's Mission Impossible pulling your face off.
Anyway, that wraps up Jennifer's plot. They save her from her succubus, this lady stealing her life, which was not the main plot at all, just a weird side plot. Nimoy runs upstairs. He sees this old woman, Mrs. Stanford, like menacing the actress. And the two of them get in a physical fight where I was like blown away because I'm like, oh, this old lady is beating the shit out of Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
For an extended period of time, they have a physical fight until finally Leonard Nimoy tears off her face.
And it's Parrish.
And it's this old John Parrish, the creep. It's been him all along because he's such a good actor.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is the performance of his life.
It's a hell of a performance, you guys. They fight a little bit longer. I like the fight only because at some point, like, he like throws a bucket really hard at Leonard Nimoy, which I looked like was unscripted. Because he throws a bucket real hard at him. Nimoy like stumbles out onto the like balcony. He's precariously hanging over the seashore. And what does John Parrish decide the best way to knock him off this balcony is?
Full bore wheelchair charge.
Yeah. Wheelchair missile. Runs as fast as he can with the wheelchair into, again, another rickety balcony. So he goes right over the end.
Yeah, Nimoy dives out of the way, and poor John Parrish just plummets to his death.
The beautiful thing about this balcony is like it is a full concrete balcony, but then as soon as he hits it, like the rocks turn into like foam, like Hollywood studio rocks.
He went real fast though, real fast.
There's explosives on the front of the wheelchair that just blow through it.
I mean, my God, what a way to wrap this up. I mean, from this point forward, like they save the day, they cut out, and they're kind of all like everyone's going their separate ways. The police are closing down the manor for some reason, and Nimoy and Michelle are going to go their own separate ways. But suddenly he has another vision.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get the gang back together and head off to France to solve another mystery.
Yeah, and they imply it's another occult thing. So that's going to be the thread through the series is they're always fighting the occult because that was big in the 70s.
Wasn't it Parrish that he had the vision of?
No.
Parrish, wasn't it?
No, it was just it was a new guy. It was like
a blind guy.
It was a blind guy with a medallion.
Oh, I thought it was just like Parrish with like a new crippled costume.
Oh, you think it's...
Oh, maybe.
Oh, maybe that's the show. He's constantly
Parrish is like the...
Parrish always gets away.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, that about wraps it up. I'm going to give you a couple little fun facts I looked up about the show, which aren't that fun, but it's kind of interesting. The actress, Andrea Glenn, was played by Vera Miles.
That's right, yeah.
From Psycho. She was
the sister
in Psycho who like spends the entire movie trying to find what happened to her sister who's killed.
And the less popular Psycho too.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's a pretty good gift for this movie.
There's a couple actors and actresses here that are pretty good and I think better than the material. Even Nimoy. I don't know how strong an actor he is because again, I only ever saw him in Star Trek, but this material is hard to work with. So I think you got to get a little bit of leeway with these actors.
For sure. I was looking into the writer a little bit. This Theodore Apstein.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice that the last movie he ever wrote was called Bloodlink? And the plot to it is about a man who starts having psychic visions who has to travel to Europe to solve a murder.
No way.
Yeah, the only difference is the person who's doing the murders is his doppelganger. So he really liked this concept, and he really wanted to go back and take another crack at it in 1982.
And I'm looking at right now, this movie's getting Bloodlink's getting a 5.6 out of 10. What people give it. So that's not that bad.
I'd watch it.
Bloodlink.
That brings me up to my next question then, you guys. So obviously we know this did not become a TV series, but like what's the plot? Like what's the story engine? If this show goes to series, what's the story engine of this show?
I mean, what they set up was, it seems like they're dealing with an occult that is going to get deeper and deeper as they go through Europe, like a Europe spanning show. But I don't know. I don't know if
the inciting incident was the vision. That was the only thing that. But that was the other thing too. It wasn't clear why like this race car driver was, you know,
why he's in charge.
Why he has to be the guy that has the vision.
Here's
or
what
why
I think
he needs
happens
to be
on this show: is every week he's on his way to a new European car race where he happens to have a vision every week. And now I think John Parrish is responsible for every single one.
Well, they do mention. He mentions at the end. He's like, when you think they're going to go off their own ways, and he's like, wait a minute, that vision. He's like, I do have another race in Paris or wherever it is. It's like, oh, so that is what it's going to be. He's never going to give up being a race car driver, which I
think we get a race in every episode.
Yeah.
Until finally he gets to race the devil. Like, I think that's how this all culminates.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a better title.
It should have been called Race the Devil.
Yeah.
Oh, Baffled, you fucked it up.
Yeah. Race the Devil, !
I like Baffled. I felt like that was a apt title for the film.
100% an apt title for the film. All right, you guys. You want to wrap this up?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Will, typically we rate these shows usually on the IMDb scale of like 1 to 10 stars.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us kind of like a star rating and kind of why you feel that?
I'm going to go 3 stars.
Oh, real low.
I enjoyed it for its awfulness. I laughed out loud at scenes that I was not supposed to laugh out loud at, and I found myself trying to rewrite the script while I was watching the film, which always indicates,
high quality.
Yeah, a high quality film. I just was like so curious about like what these script meetings might have been between the writer and the director.
I don't think there was any script meetings.
And like, did Leonard Nimoy ask no questions when he took this job? Like,
I think this is just an example of something where nothing worked. Maybe it was because of the talent or lack thereof of the people working on it. Maybe it was just nothing worked out. Maybe if this was a different cast, to be better, or they had one more script rewriter, or who knows, or a better editor. But I just think this is an example where you could pretty much go through everything and nothing works. So it just was a disaster from top to bottom.
I really like the image of like this script ending up on Leonard Nimoy's agent's desk and him picking up the phone being like, Leonard, do I got a movie for you?
Yeah. It's a student film that's done with Leonard Nimoy and high-priced race car scenes for $72.
Yeah, a real nice set. That's about it. Jordan, what do you want to give this?
I'm also going to give a very similar score. I also enjoyed it because it was ridiculous, but I had to watch it over 2 days because it was just mind-numbing. I'm giving it a 3.5.
3.5. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed watching it for sure. I really like probably the first 10 minutes. I love the setup. I'd watch that, go back and watch that over and over again. A few little bits here and there. But I'm gonna give it a 4. I'm gonna be a little more generous for some reason. I'm gonna go for a 4.
Well, the thing is, though, you're right though. The setup is good for it. Again, race car driver who finds he has a secret ESP and he sees visions and he solves mysteries. Okay, that's ridiculous. That's a show you could watch. But it's almost like they didn't want to commit to it enough. Like they might as well have made it really salacious or really over the top or really ridiculous. But they just didn't want to invest in it. So you end up with this kind of wishy-washy story.
Well, what it feels like to me is someone wrote a classic semi-supernatural British whodunit in a mansion. Like there's someone's doing something to someone in a mansion using the occult, and then someone else came along and was like, I've got an idea for a race car driver who's a psychic, and they're like, all right, just shove that in here somehow, because the two rarely intersect. The two plot lines intersect only like passingly.
And you could take out any of the lines of the occult and it would just make as much or as little sense as it does. You just be like, there's no like, you don't see any scenes of like, you know, devil worship or sacrifices, or there's nothing other than a little medallion. It could have just been like, oh, I don't know. Like this could have been re-edited to be the whole time was Miss Faraday trying to get young. That makes as much sense.
I mean, that's a whole plot right there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you cut out Leonard Nimoy and just have the actress stand up for herself at the end, that could end the movie too. It's fine.
Yeah,
you don't need Nimoy.
It just blows my mind how like no one made any comments on this. Like even there was a big crew there was a guy there loading the film into the camera.
You want
there
the
was
gaffer to be like,
AD.
wait a minute, guys. This don't make sense to me.
Yeah, I do. I want someone to be like, But why? Why would this character do this at this point in the movie?
Because the gaffer's too busy saying that he's just licking his fingers counting his money. Am I right? Am I right, gaffers? You know it's true.
Where are my gaffers out there?
Where's my gaffers out there? With a great non-education.
Oh, shit.
That's right. I said it.
Jordan, what's your email so all these gaffers can email you?
It's Luke at...
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm a huge fan of your guys' show and really thank you both for having me on. It was an honor and it was really fun.
Oh, it was a pleasure having you. We were excited to have you.
Yeah, we'll have to pick another show from the 1970s that's just as insane for the next time you come by.
look
It shouldn't
forward
be
to it.
hard. It shouldn't be hard to find.
I mean, is this a high bar for you or a low bar? Or you don't even know where this bar is?
I watched the movie in one sitting. I was thoroughly engaged the whole time. But it's fun. I mean, I think it's fun because you're engaged for reasons that the show doesn't want you to be engaged with, but I couldn't wait to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. It was, I know we gave it low ratings, and I'm not 100% sure I would necessarily recommend you run out and watch it, but I had a good time while I watched it.
It's a good movie to have in the background. You're like, what was happening?
No, I disagree. I think if you have it in the background, like when the craziness, like when the illogical stuff happens, you're like, oh, I must have missed something that led to this being a logical plot point. But the reality is no, you did not miss anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
And I like, by the way, I think this was a bit of a mess in terms of I was trying to explain the plot, but it still probably makes more sense than actually watching the movie.
I spent a good hour and a half to 2 hours going through my notes, trying to phase them into a streamline of this plot. It was nearly impossible. All right, you guys, let's wrap this up. Will, thanks for coming out.
Thank you guys so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
If you want to talk to us some more about Leonard Nimoy and this bizarre Baffled show, you can get a hold of us at Gmail, at our email, which is continuumdrag@gmail.com. And obviously, Will's been calling out a million things we need to put online from this show. So follow us at Instagram and Twitter at continuumdrag, and we're definitely going to have like video clips and GIFs of some of the crazier stuff from this show. In the meantime, thanks for joining us, all you listeners out there. And Jordan, see you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Continuum Drag is recorded at Astrolab Studios in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Ruxedler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Adam Wheatner, Jeff Hanley, and Dwayne Wright.